Okay, please stand for the presentation of the national colors by the Army Cadets of Francis Lewis High School.
Colors, us, head, us, forward, us. Arc time, arch. Colors, halt. Left, ace. Freeze, head, arms.
Justice Randall, retired Colonel, New York Army National Guard, will now lead us in the recital of the Pledge of Allegiance. Justice Ang.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Will you join me in honoring our nation's colors? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, singing the national anthem for us today is Regina Wilson, FDNY Engine 219 in Park Slope, and the President of the United Women Firefighters.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we march were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order, arms. Ace. Forward, arch.
Now giving the invocation is the FDNY chaplain, Rabbi Potasnik.
Thank you. I come here today not just to offer an invocation, but to say thank you. I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. My parents lost 5 children during that horrific period, so I grew up and was taught to always have reverence for those who serve our country. When I was growing up, every year before Memorial Day, we would go to the local cemetery, and my parents would place small stones above all the monuments that were there. And then my father would say very simply in Yiddish, "Mizanen do, we're here. We didn't forget you." So thus we come here today to all of you who are with us and those who are not with us, and say very simply once again, we are here and you will always remain within us. Amen.
Please be seated. I'd like to welcome everybody today. Thank you for coming out in this climate weather. Normally we'd be outside, but as you can tell, we didn't want anybody to get wet, so we had it inside. So once again, thank you. Right now I'd like to introduce the Deputy Borough President of Queens County, Barry Grudenchik.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Borough Hall. As Mark told you, unfortunately, we're inside today. I voted for outside, but you can see the deputy spot doesn't have as much sway as I thought it did. But it is threatened, so we're glad to be in here. I want to recognize, before I go any further, two people that I recognize. Vincent Curie, who is the chair of Community Board 5 in Glendale and Ridgewood and other places, and my dear friend also, Cy Schwartz, who is a member of Community Board 8, and he still gets into his uniform. And Cy, it's got to be at least 10 years old, right? The uniform. Good morning, everybody. At this time, I would ask that all the veterans who have served our nation and all the Gold Star mothers who are in the, if you could please stand and be recognized, and we could give them a round of applause. Thank you all. Thank you for your service. Every year we gather, and normally, as we said, it's normally outside, but we're here today inside to remember our veterans, and most importantly, to remember those who have given their lives in service to our nation. We take this to think about all those in uniform, whether they're here in the United States or around the world, many of them in places that we will never hear of, many of them doing missions that we will never hear of either. And they've put themselves in harm's way to protect and defend our nation and the way of life. Today's keynote speaker will have some poignant words to say about this in a few minutes. And though our military forces have now left Iraq, there is still a big presence in Afghanistan and in Korea and in Germany, and as I said, in many places that we've never heard of. And every week, regrettably and unfortunately, a few names are listed of our service members who have been killed in action or have died there. Their ages range from 18 years old to 5 and even beyond. And it breaks our hearts that soldiers and Marines are killed on battlefields so foreign and so far away from our homes. One can only think of the anguish of their loved ones being notified by that special unit showing up at the home of the casualty in their dress uniform and delivering the sad and grim news. As we reflect on the wreath that is dedicated to those who have died in service, let us also remember their families. Let us remember their survivors and their units who also carry on the burden of grief. After TAPS is played this morning, I invite you to reflect on the words on the cover of your program. They are taken from a letter that President Abraham Lincoln wrote to a grieving mother during the Civil War in 1864. And its words are inscribed on one of the flower beds in the garden outside. I know most of you have been to the garden, but it really looks beautiful today. And those words are, "If I pray that our Heavenly Father may assuage the anguish of your bereavement and leave you only the cherished memory of the lost and the solemn pride that must be yours to have laid so costly a sacrifice on the altar of freedom." That was to Mrs. Bixby. 5 of her sons were killed in action during the Civil War to prevent our nation from being split in two. At this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Every year we are graced with a distinguished speaker who tells of his or her story of serving in the United States Armed Forces. This year we are honored to have Lieutenant Colonel Neil F. Murphy, Jr., United States Marine Corps. Colonel Murphy, just this last month, returned from Helmand Province in Afghanistan. His service record includes 13 months with 2 Marine Expeditionary Force Forward, military assistant to the commanding general, region command at Camp Leatherneck, and in the G3 operations, I'm going to remove this, I'm sorry, Fire Effects Coordination Cell as Communications Strategy Officer. During Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, with 1 military expeditionary force forward on the initial invasion, and again in Fallujah with 2 military expeditionary force forward in 2005 and 2006. His decorations include the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, 2 Meritorious Service Medals, the Joint Service Medal, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medals, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medals, Coast Guard Achievement Medal, the Presidential Unit Citation, Defense Service Medals, the Iraqi Freedom Medals, the Afghanistan Campaign Medals, the Global and Expeditionary War on Terrorism Service Medals, Korean Defense Service Medals, and the Article 5 NATO Medal. I think it is not overstating it to say that this gentleman has served our country with distinction. He is presently Director of the Marine Corps Public Affairs for New York City. He's here with his wife this morning as well. Ladies and gentlemen, veterans, please give a warm welcome for today's keynote speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Neil F. Murphy, Jr.
Thank you very much. Your bio always sounds a lot better than you really think you are, you know. That sounded pretty good. It didn't sound like me, but first I would like to thank the Borough President for inviting me here today, all of our veterans, our first responders, and the families of those in service. I'd also like to thank our ROTC crew from Francis Lewis for taking some time out here today as we honor our veterans. And we prepare, getting a head start today, to pay the proper respects to those who have given their lives so that even people who never fully appreciate it can live free. When I was asked to speak here today by Commissioner Holliday, I was serving in Helmand Province on my third tour of duty away from my wife, children, and friends. Without hesitation, I said yes, no matter what. I've always appreciated the opportunity to talk, especially about our veterans and our great country. And I also get to people that I'm lucky enough to serve with. I'm often reminded of this when I'm asked to talk about my favorite poem by Robert Frost. In a poem called A Time to Talk, Robert Frost says, "When a friend calls to me from the road and slows his horse to a meet, I don't stand still and look around on the hills I haven't hoed and shout from where I am, 'What is it?' No, not as there is a time to talk. I thrust my hoe in the mellow ground, blade end up and 5 feet tall, and I plod. I go Stonewall for a friendly visit." So I'm always up for a friendly visit in Queens. In fact, I got to celebrate Queens Flag Day just about a month ago with some of the people in this room. I really enjoyed it. And I know from at that event the kind of people who fabric of Queens. And I know that you, quote unquote, get it. And you appreciate the sacrifices that are made for our freedom. And that you take the time to talk about this. Everyone here has their own individual personal story or family story, their struggles, what their families went through, what they had to do to get here, and what they've done to live free. I also knew that I wanted to make sure that on top of your knowledge and appreciation of our fallen from previous wars, that I ensured that I helped share with you the Marines, your soldiers, your sailors, your airmen, and your Coast Guardsmen today continue to uphold the spirit and honor of those who came before them, and that we never fail to remember our veterans and fallen brothers and sisters as we do our duty to build a better place. In 6 days from now, on Monday the 28th, people across Queens, New York, and across our awesome country will likely get a day off from work to cook out. Maybe they'll go to Corona Park, maybe they'll go to Coney Island Beach, and set out on a summer filled with good times and the joys that come with living in a free country. Some may choose to go to a parade or event like at places like the USS Intrepid to honor people they never met, or attend memorial at any one of the hundreds of memorials for those who served and died. Some, sadly, may spend the day at a giant blowout sale, watching sports, or just enjoying the day doing nothing, and they may wind up missing the actual point of the day itself. I'm not saying that people shouldn't enjoy that day, but they should first take a moment to ensure that they don't forget that that day was paid for with the blood of American members, and that's where we all in this room come in. Those Americans who died in all those wars did their duty, and we must continue to do our duty by telling their stories and honoring them. Their loved ones, their wives, their husbands and mothers, children and their friends will always miss them. And by sharing a little bit about them and knowing their stories, it helps us realize the solemn importance of this day. So I'd ask everyone to take some additional time to learn the story of an additional fallen hero. And it's very easy to find out. You can talk to any one of our veterans here. They've lost a lot of close friends. You can get on the internet and read the latest information coming from Afghanistan or things that have come up. And you can go to the library. There are thousands of individual stories of sacrifice. I keep with me and share many stories of some of my fallen friends and some others I haven't even had the chance to meet. On Memorial Day, I will talk about and remember people like Ray Mendoza and Doug Zembeck, both my friends, both majors in the Marine Corps who were killed in Iraq. They were fathers. They were all-American wrestlers. They were the type of people that you looked at and said, there is no way this guy is ever going to die. He was both built out of rock. They were chiseled individuals, and they were just awesome, awesome men. And every couple days, I try and think about Ray and Doug and the sacrifice they made and the fact that their families are going on with. I'll talk about people like Earl Vaughan. He was a Native American from Texas. He was a Marine pilot in World War II. He was killed in a long forgotten place called Chichishima. Most people think about Iwo Jima. Chichishima was an island just next to it. He was shot down right about the same time as President George Bush. He never got the opportunity to live a full and happy life. He left a fiance back in Texas. His family was forever affected by that loss. And many people don't know his story. So I will share his story whenever I get a chance. I'll also take the time to find out the names and stories of people like Sergeant Wade D. Wilson. He was 22 and he died on Friday, this past Friday in Heavens. Wade also grew up in Texas. He enlisted in the Marine Corps in June 2007. After graduating from high school, where he played football, ran track, and showed livestock at the county fair, he joined the Marine Corps to step up where others had stepped before him. His parents, his step-parents, his 3 brothers, a sister, and 3 stepsisters will never get to look at him again. They will certainly miss him on this Memorial Day, and I say a prayer for them. So along with really learning about and sharing the stories of those who died, there is one other thing we can do too. There is a small card that I've carried in my wallet since shortly after September 11th, 2000. On one side of the card is a flag of the colonies that was once used by the Marines. It's that famous "Don't Tread on Me" flag. On the other side is a poignant and very blunt and truthful quote from a British man, Stuart Mill. The quote goes like this: "War is an ugly thing, but war is not the ugliest of things. The decayed and degraded state of moral and patriotic feeling, which thinks that nothing is worth war, is much worse. The person who has nothing for which he is willing to fight, nothing which is more important than his own personal safety, is a miserable creature, and he has no chance of being free unless made and kept so by the exertions of better men than himself." Throughout history, the majority of our nation spends all kinds of time debating battle and whether battle is actually needed. Meanwhile, we still, year after year, send our most sons and daughters to fight the cancers of intolerance, hate, and injustice that we can sometimes be insulated from here in our own country. Our service members rely on us to support them, and they rely on each other, while many in our country will barely notice over this latest celebrity story on TV that somebody died today so that somebody else could be free. They continue to be faithful and stay on course and answer the call of duty for something that can't be debated. That whether we agree or not, we must never forget that peace sells and somebody has to buy it. Peace is a fragile thing that needs continual tending. As Mills alluded to, there are those that don't want people to be free, and they don't want equality. They don't want happiness, and they don't think we need to fight for it. But we do. And the way to keep peace is by staying strong and building the kind of country that breeds the kind of people that stand up for what is right and accept the risks and costs that come with it. I'm very heartened when I see our high school students today from Francis Lewis. They give me another renewed hope for America. The thing that I sometimes forget is that not everybody likes us, and not everybody wants people to be. It's hard to hear some opinions sometimes when they're contrary to your own. But the lessons of the past are the ones we must never forget and continually remember. We've learned these lessons in places recently like Afghanistan and Iraq, in Beirut, in Haiti, Vietnam, in Korea, World War II, and World War I, and on and on. If we truly care about peace, we must stay strong. If we care about peace, we must, through our strength, demonstrate our resolve to stick up for it and what is right. Never allow an ending of the peace, and be strong enough to make sure we help lead the creation of peace where it doesn't exist, and strong enough to protect it where it does. We sometimes can be trusting and naive, and as a result, sometimes we find ourselves ill-prepared. Our duty to keep our leaders honest and remember that we must continue to be ready when many of us are least ready. So as I close, I'd like to ask that we don't just look at the history of our war dead as if it were like we were visiting a museum or an archaeolite. We should honestly take a look at who they were, what they did, and how they did it. In doing so, we honor them, and in doing so, we can show courage in our daily lives and pay homage to them and their sacrifice and their excellence. Our war dead have left a legacy of freedom, and we must teach our children the value of sacrifice and work and virtue and the necessary conditions for freedom. We must teach them love of country, because America is a great country that deserves to be. While we remember and honor our dead on Monday, we can also honor the living too. This week, Fleet Week occurs. You can head down to the West Side Piers in Manhattan, or you can go over to Corona Park on Sunday the 20th, about 12 o'clock, and meet some of the amazing young sailors, Coast Guardsmen, airmen, soldiers, and Marines who are in town. You can meet them in person and get to know them now and thank them for serving their country, because they are doing great work. And someday we may find that it's too late to thank them, and we could be remembering them as heroes. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been an absolute honor to speak with you, and I wish you a good Memorial Day filled with many amazing that you find out about our fellow Americans and Queens natives who have answered the call and given their lives for our freedom. Thank you.
Colonel, thank you for those inspiring words, and if I could ask you to come back here a second. You mentioned Francis Lewis, and most people in Queens know Francis Lewis Boulevard. It runs from the very north of our county in Whitestone all the way down to Rosedale and Springfield Gardens, and it covers a great swath of eastern Queens. Francis Lewis had a high school named after him, but what most people, or many people, don't know is that he was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. So as we prepare to celebrate Memorial Day, 236 years ago, Francis Lewis was probably getting ready to make his way to Philadelphia, where he risked his life because he certainly, had the revolution failed, all the signers of the Declaration of Independence would certainly have been hung, not in effigy, but they would have been executed by the British soldiers at that time. So it's something to think about. We drive past that he risked his life so that we might gather here today, and that we remember him 236 years later, along with all those who signed the Declaration and fought in the Revolution and all our wars. At this time, It gives me great pleasure because, you know, this is still a government. If we don't have a proclamation, something's wrong. If I hold it here, I don't have to take off my glasses. I also want to recognize two individuals who have not been recognized yet, but certainly must be, and one is Chief Pazuti, who is the commander of Queens Patrol Borough North. And another is a young man who, whose family left Nazi Germany before World War II, and it's been our pleasure to have him here for a number of years now. As I don't think I can call him an intern. He's a little too old to be an intern, but he has been a volunteer here working with our fiscal staff, and he was recently awarded, justly awarded by through the work of Congressman Robert Turner, the Bronze Star Medal for his service to our nation during World War II. Arno Heller, if you'd please stand and be recognized. He doesn't want to stand. And we have a proclamation from Borough President Helen Marshall. And whereas Lieutenant Colonel Neil F. Murphy Jr. was born in Boston, I do have it on good authority, he is a Mets fan now though, received, not a Yankee fan, received a BA from Norwich University and an MPA from the University of Oklahoma. And whereas commissioned through the platoon leaders course, he went on to serve as public affairs officer with 3rd Marines Division in Okinawa, Japan. And whereas during Operation Iraqi Freedom 2003, he served with 1 Marine Expeditionary Force Forward on initial invasion and later again in Fallujah, Afghanistan. He has served stateside at Camp Lejeune, Fort George, G. Meade, as an instructor at the Department of Defense Information School. And whereas Lieutenant Colonel Murphy Jr. has served with the United States Armed Forces in Tokyo, Japan, and as the Deputy Director of Public Affairs, and recently returned from Helmand Province, Afghanistan, after 13 months of duty, and is currently Director of Marine Corps Public Affairs, New York City. And whereas Lieutenant Murphy has received numerous military decorations, is civically active in every community in which he has lived while enjoying an eclectic balance of interests. Now, therefore, I, Helen M. Marshall, President of the Borough of Queens, in the City of New York, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, May 2nd, 2012, as Lieutenant Colonel Neil F. Murphy Jr. Day in Queens, with admiration for your illustrious military career and for your commitment to the safety and defense of our nation. And this is done at Queensborough Hall, Kew Gardens in the City of New York on this 20th day of May in the year 2012. And as I presented at this time, at this time we will acknowledge the wreath, which is usually placed and will be later placed in our Veterans Memorial Garden, symbolic for those who have made the supreme sacrifice fighting for the freedom that we all enjoy today. Would everybody please stand while taps is played.